Right, what have I got today? Boosh. Right, it's the Nitecore Tiki, but it's different. This is the GITD version, or as they would call it, glow in the dark. I presume that's what that stands for anyway. So it doesn't seem like 5 minutes ago that I reviewed the Tiki. In fact, if you remember, I rated it so highly that I put it on my keys. I've still got it on my keys and I still love it. Now the difference between this and the other one is very, very minimal. There's one extra feature and that's it. So with that in mind, I'm going to quickly cover that extra feature, and then I'm probably going to direct you to or show you a copy of my previous review, because it still stands. It's the same emitter, it's still TIR, still puts out 300 lumens, still using the Osram P8 LED in this particular model. It's got the extra ones. It's got the high CRI and the UV. I think it's using about 365 nanometer range of wavelength of light anyway. But other than that, it's exactly the same, and it's still USB rechargeable and all of that good stuff. So let's discuss what the difference is. So what on earth is the difference between this new glow-in-the-dark version? Obviously by the name you know what the answer is. It glows in the dark. So if you provide some light for it, so sunlight, ideally UV light, although that's not very sort of readable unless you're out in sunlight or you're using a UV light, but if you do that, it's going to produce somewhat a glow for the dark there. So you can see there's a bit of glow in the dark there. So if you remember, I did my review recently of the, I think these are the Stora cells. Now these are all glow in the dark. These were the moonshine version or whatever the hell they call them. So these, again, same effect. So if you apply light to them for any period of time, generally about, you want a couple of minutes. Sunlight's going to be better because it's very bright. But again, you can see in the middle there, you've got a glow in the dark section there. So what's actually going on there? Well, this effect, it's basically called, it's sort of photoluminescence, really. So what's going on here is sort of light hitting it, and it's exciting certain particles. Now those particles aren't immediately letting that light energy come back. It's slowly coming back. So generally what they use for this sort of thing is they'll use something like zinc sulfide, I think is the chemical name. It's been used for a long time. It's not the best. And if you remember on this, you were getting sort of half an hour-ish before this was running out. You can see that's still active there. Whereas on this one, not so active, and I'll discuss why that might be. So probably using zinc sulfide. I would have preferred them to have used something like, I think it's strontium oxide aluminate, which is a much newer chemical that they use for glow in the dark, and it produces, the glow lasts for like sort of 10 times longer than something like zinc sulfide. So I was hoping that this was going to use that, because that would have been great to have seen that. You use the light and you charge it up with a bit of light and it glows in your pocket for hours. That would have been fantastic. Not the case. I feel like they're using zinc sulfide here, which is the old stuff, and even then they must be using a tiny amount, because look, since I've been blabbering on and talking away, that glow in the dark effect's gone. In fact, I did some tests, so let's move this out of the way. Here's some tests that I did. So as you can see, I applied a lot of light. I waited 5 minutes. I blasted it with light. I waited 5 minutes, and then what happened was I let it run in complete darkness at night. And what happened was, as you can see, the light basically disappeared after about the 3 minute mark. It was very, very, very residual. I could just see it with the human eye up to about, let's say, 4.5 minutes. Very, very, very small amount, and you could only really see it with a human eye. The camera certainly wasn't picking it up, and by 5 minutes, totally dead, under 5 minutes. So very sort of, that's pretty poor. I mean, if you know anything about the sort of different glow in the darks and stuff, I mean, I carry a Tritium vial on my flashlight, on my keychain anyway. Now this glows regardless of light levels. You could put this in a darkened room and it would glow for 15 years. But again, this is using a different technology. You get a very small amount of light. Now, can you see there? There's a small amount of green glow coming off there. If I can get it to focus. Come on, focus, you swine. There. Okay. So as you can see, very, very, very small amount. But this is using radioluminescence. In other words, there's a tritium gas in here. These are generally called tritium vials because it's a vial of gas. And then what's happening is, because there's tritium gas in there, electrons are being emitted through beta decay. And then what's happening is it's hitting a phosphor layer and glowing and causing that light effect, but it's very, very, very small. There's really not a lot of light. It's okay for markers and things like that, and you could argue that this isn't meant to glow too much, but it's just, I found it really poor, very, very, very poor. I was not impressed one little bit. So the question is, should you get this over this version? If they're the same price, hey, why not? But if there's a premium on this, I wouldn't, because it's exactly the same thing. And if the glow's only lasting a couple of minutes, what's the point? I would have preferred to have seen more. So rather than go over more and more and more of the stats, which are exactly the same as the last one, I'm going to get the review for this one and show you that. So in fact, I think it's just over here. So let's grab it. There you go, got it. Right, and I'll pull this over here. Right, so if you just watch this, I'm going for a walk. Right, what am I looking at today? Boosh. Well, it is a light that I've been looking at for a period of time. That's why this is already open, so I've carried this for a couple of weeks. And it's a keychain flashlight, so I'm praying and hoping here that I can make this video under an hour. So let's see if I can do that. So anyway, what is this? This is the Nitecore TIKI. Now, avoid all the rest of this stuff here. This is the Chinese version, so not everyone's going to be able to read that. But I'm going to go over it in English, obviously. So when I first saw this, I thought, hang on a minute, I recognised this. Now I looked at the light, and then I realised that I have something very similar. And I think I've gone over this in a couple of videos. I think I did it on the keychain comparison I did outside, and another video. In fact, I compared the beams of both of these, so I'll put a link. Well, I'll put it in the description there, but that's it up there. That's the video that I did. So if you want to have a look at that, you can, and it's a direct comparison, because I think that's important, because they're so damn similar. I mean, I'll take this out the box. So this is the box that it comes in. Very simple, so boosh, get rid of that. There's no instructions. So this is the Nitecore TIKI on the left here. Now this is the RovyVon, the RovyVon A8 Aurora, as they call it. Now look at the similarities. Let's put them together. Very, very, very similar. I mean, as I'm sure you can see, not a lot of differences. The bezel's slightly bigger on the Nitecore on the left here. The button is slightly fatter and not as tall. This has 3 auxiliary lights, whereas this only has 2. And as you can see, the auxiliary lights on the RovyVon are behind a clear section, whereas here it's behind a sort of roughed up section, which gives you a slightly more diffuse light, although it still does work, and I'm very happy with it. So very, very similar. So when I first saw these together, in my own mind I was thinking, hang on a minute, is Nitecore just doing nothing but a knockoff of the RovyVon, and it's going to be a load of rubbish, and how dare they do this? Who do they think they are? That's what came to my mind. And when I'd stopped thinking about that, I thought, well, there's only one way to find out, isn't there? Stop waffling and let's have a look at it. So we'll put that to one side for a second, and we'll concentrate just on this light, and then I'll discuss the similarities at the end when I do some more comparisons. Okay, so the Nitecore TIKI, now this is using a Osram P8 LED, if I remember rightly. Yes, the Osram P8 LED, which I was happy to see, because I'm sick of all the G3 lights that I've been looking at recently, and going back and looking at the older ones, that's what a lot of them seem to be using, the G3s. This will produce a maximum of 300 lumens, so there's 300 lumens. You can go straight to its maximum output there. It does have a step down, but we'll go over that in the runtime section. So it's using a TIR, so I'll show you that there. So you have the LED, and then behind that you have a solid piece of plastic, which is designed to give you a diffuse beam. Because this is a keychain light, I'm not going to bore people with going over the beam types, but I'll very quickly, without drawings, discuss it. So in general, the sort of output that you're going to have is you're going to have something like on a keychain light anyway. These aren't throwers, so we're just going to go over an orange peel reflector and a TIR. So there's an orange peel reflector, so you can see the LED in the middle there, and it's surrounded by empty space, and the surroundings there are a reflective material, but it's not smooth. Now what that's trying to do is it's trying to give you a little bit of throw, but it's trying to define the areas in a better manner. So for example, here's my current EDC key setup. I mean, I've got my Tile Pro and all of that, and I use the TI3, if I remember that right. Yes, the TI3 by ThruNite. Now again, that's a orange peel reflector if it focuses there. So what sort of beam does that give you? Well, let's have a look. So we'll put that on a high output there. In fact, I probably need to charge the battery. Yeah, I do. Okay, which is another thing that I'm going to come to at the end of this review. So okay, we'll go back to this one as an example. So we'll put this on high. There you go. Right, so you've got these marked zones. So you've got your spill zone, which is the light directly from the LED, and this is the light that's going to push forward. But they're quite, it's not obscuring detail too much. You can still see the T on this T for Trek here. Now this is going to diffuse the light a lot more. Now bear in mind this is 120 lumens or thereabouts anyway, and on 300 look, it's very diffuse. There is something of a zone there, can you see between my fingers there? There's something of a hot spot there, but it's very hard. It's only defined on certain surfaces and structures, and if you pull back, it's very hard to see. Not a lot of artifacts. I was happy with this, although if you hold and twist, there's a few tiny, it's certainly not flower petaling because it's not a smooth reflector, but there's a few tiny little artifacts that you can see on white walls, but for a keychain light, it's absolutely fine. So most of the stuff you're going to do with a keychain light, this is going to be like your backup light. So most of the things you're going to do with this are going to be up close. Now with that in mind, 300 lumens is more than enough for up close stuff. You know, trying to find something, pointing it to your feet and walking, using it in a room or in the car or looking under the car and things like that, in a garage or any of that sort of stuff. That is the right amount of output. And for this size, I think it's about right, because as you can see, the battery isn't that big. Now the battery is that silver package there. So from here to here, you see the silver package inside the section there. Now it's USB rechargeable, but we'll go over that. So I think that's because it's only, I think it's about 130 milliamp hour battery, which is the same as the RovyVon, and in comparisons to something like the, I mean this is the Astrolux here, but if you look at a AAA keychain light, let's look at the milliamp rating for this. So if we can find it, there you go. So 750 milliamp hours. So compare that to this, 130. So you know, very, very different setup, but we'll explain that and we'll go over the run times and all of that sort of stuff. So let's put that to one side for a second. So I've told it does 300 lumens TIR. Now this only comes in a white tint, so if you want anything other than that, tough. Again, comparing that to the RovyVon, this is a more of a warm tint, so this is going to look slightly brighter, because I had a nice comment on the video that I did comparing just the beams, and even though this is 300 lumens and the RovyVon is 350, should expect that, oh well, this is lighter. It doesn't look like that, and when you're walking in the middle of nowhere, this is actually slightly more useful, although it's going to be slightly more reflective, and it's not as good in mist, but because it's not a thrower, that's not such an issue, and most people aren't going to notice that. So now it also has a secondary mode. In fact, it has two secondary modes. It's got a UV mode, which I think it's about 365 nanometer range. So nanometer range, what I'm talking about there is the frequency of the light that's coming away from that, and it also has a high CRI light. Now, I think the CRI from this is about 70. You know, CRI is just colour reproduction index. In other words, the higher the colour reproduction index, the less of a strange colour cast you get, and a better representation of all colours available. So if you imagine something like, if you go to like a tanning salon or something like that, or you're using a grow light, you get this awful purple colour cast and everything looks bloody awful, for want of a better expression. You're just getting a very short bandwidth of light and nothing else, and it doesn't represent colours very well. So that the more you're able to represent colours, the more beautiful things look and the more true to life they look. In other words, when I say true to life, I mean more like natural daylight anyway. So this has a very high CRI of 90, but we'll go over that when we go over the UI. So this is only an IP66, so yes, it's dust proof, but it's not waterproof. Now the reason it's not waterproof is because of this here. So it's not perfectly sealed. It can't be perfectly sealed because you need to use a USB, micro USB to charge it. Now they don't give you a cable with this. I realise their excuse is going to be, aha, we're saving the environment, which is, they're not saving the environment, they're just trying to please the shareholders and make more money, but that's up to them. Okay, so most people will have a micro USB. In fact, let's have a look. I think I've got one. There's one there. So there's a micro USB cable. So obviously there's your two ends, and we'll just check it out. We'll just make sure that it works, because I want to show you how the functioning of that. So we'll plug that in there. Has to be of a certain orientation. I would have rather have seen type C, but I realise as soon as I say that, people in the comments will say, oh, it makes it 1/4 millimeter bigger. I don't care if that's 1/4 millimeter bigger. I really don't care. Look at the size in comparison to something like that. 1/2 millimeter is not going to make my life any worse. So we'll just see if that works. Right, there you go. So let's have a look. Right, so this will do. So we'll just plug this in and see if it charges. There you go, it's charging, and it's taking a very, very small amount of charge there, 0.1 of an amp. Ignore that figure on the left there at about 5 volts. So it trickle charge basically, but it's such a small battery you don't need it to be zapping the battery and cooking it like a steak on a Texas barbecue. So that's nice to see. And when this light goes out, this little blue light, that means it's finished charging, and you can just take that out. So brilliant. I've like I say, I've used this for a couple of weeks. I've charged it on computers, I've charged it in the car, and I've charged it with power banks. Never had a problem. It's been brilliant. It's charged pretty rapidly actually. Okay, so drop rating is only 1 meter. I would have preferred to have seen more. I don't understand why the drop rating is only 1 meter. They're saying if you drop it from 1 meter, it's going to survive. It's a light key ring, so I can't imagine. And with this metal near this, and this is plastic, this isn't going to break or shatter. I don't know why that drop rating is so low. I would have preferred to have seen at least 1.5 meters, but okay, it's a cheaper light, so I'll accept that. Okay, so let's go over the UI. Now, UI is very, very simple. If you do want to use it just quickly, you just press and hold and you get straight to maximum. So there's your 300 lumens. Now, in 300 lumens, that's what they term as the high mode. You get 30 minutes out of that. I think that's fantastic. Now, I've discussed this before. I once went geocaching and all I had was this, and it got dark, and I didn't think it was going to get dark. Now, it took me 20 minutes to get back through some woods, and the trees were very, very close in. If I hadn't have had this, I wouldn't have got back. And it's one of the reasons why sometimes I say I like lights like this. This is the Claris Mini one, but you're not even getting 20 minutes out of this. You're getting about 15 to 20 minutes at best. On the decent setting anyway like that. So I like the size of this, but I don't want to carry it because this is going to give me a slightly longer runtime. And in regards to this, runtime has been brilliant, and I have done some testing which I'll discuss later on. So there's your main mode anyway, so it's either on or it's off. Now within that, you've got your double click. Now double click takes you into your normal modes. So if you want to progress through them, it's just a single click. Like that. So there's your first mode, very, very low. Now they call that ultra low. That's 1 lumen. So I'm happy to see a nice proper low mode instead of this 5 lumens and 10 lumens and things like that. Just take it straight down to sub lumen or 1 lumen. You get 40 hours out of that on a full battery. These are Nitecore's figures, not mine, because I'll go over mine later on. And then press it again. And your next one is low. Now that's 15 lumens, but you get 4 hours out of that. And I've tried that doing various tasks, and it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Then you've got medium, so that the next mode up, that's with they term that medium anyway. Now that's 60 lumens. Now they're saying that will give you about an hour. So about an hour. If you try and memorize these, you know how much you've got, you know what to work with. And then the next mode is high, so that's the highest output there. Now 300 lumens. Again, I mentioned this before. That's going to give you 30 minutes, but there is a step down. So with that in mind, I did some testing. So I'll put a little video up here. So I did some testing on runtime. So as you can see, what happened was I turned it on, I put it on the maximum setting, and then I set a timer away. So what happens is after about a minute, bearing in mind we're on high, it steps down to medium. So this is burning through the battery rather rapidly, and then it steps down to medium, which is 60 lumens, which would effectively give you an hour if it was fully charged at that point. But it's slightly below that because it's already been running in high there. And then if you notice, after about 30, I think it was about 30 minutes, 31 minutes, 42 seconds or something off the top of my head, it then steps down. It then starts a slow descent to almost nothing. So it does very similar to the runtime testing that I did on the Nitecore Tube. So what happens with that is it reaches this point where it decides, right, I'm going to start ramping slowly down until it's empty. Now I gave up testing after about an hour and a half. I did let it run again after that, and it went past 2 hours, and I thought, well, this is going to go on forever, and there was a tiny bit of light coming out. But I like that system where it's giving you your maximum for about a minute, then stepping down to a mode that you can use, and then from that point, after about half an hour, it's then thinking, right, there's not a lot of battery left here, and it starts ramping down and down and down. And it's a good visual indication of the battery charge, because there's no indication of how much charge is here anyway. It doesn't certainly have a battery check or anything like that, or an e-locker, which is a bit of a shame. So we'll move quickly on to the auxiliary lights. So to get them, instead of double click, it's triple. So 1, 2, 3. So there's your first mode, UV. I haven't got a clue what that's for, unless you want to join CSI or you're checking for counterfeit dollar bills or something like that. You've got that there if you want it. I can't think why you would want that, but anyway, it does exist. Okay, so your next mode is that there's your high CRI mode. So if you remember, I mentioned before the CRI on the main beams is something around 70%. So it's okay, it's perfectly acceptable. Now this is way up there, it's 90 plus they're quoting, those are Nitecore's figures. So it's really good, and bear in mind you can tail stand this or hang it in a camp and things like that, in the camp, hang it on inside the hood of the car and things like that. It's very useful and for looking at certain things and just having as a diffuse light. And because of that coating where it's not see-through like the RovyVons is, where you can see right through, it does help give it a bit more diffuse light, and it's not too dazzling on the eye. It cuts that out a little bit, so nice to see. And then I think if you press that again, you have a beacon mode there. So that's another extra mode there, handy, and it's not going to use a lot of battery. So you're probably thinking, what are the run times on those modes? Well, I'll turn that off and I'll tell you. Right, so run times, UV, you get 45 minutes on the auxiliary there. The auxiliary LED is only running at about 22 lumens, although it does give you enough to work by, especially if you're up close and you're doing something at arm's length. It's very, very handy, and it's going to give you an hour and a half, so that's very, very good. And on that flash mode, I think Nitecore quote about 20 hours is the beacon. That's really, really good. I really like that, so I'm very, very happy with that. So I mean, we've gone over the run times there, but I want to go over some pros and cons, and I want to try and make this a rapid, quick review. So we'll quickly go over that. So size is definitely a pro. I mean, look at the size, look at it in comparison to, I mean, this is a beautiful light. I really like the lumen top. I always forget the number, EDC01. I love this different knurling, it's brilliant. The TIR works, it's extremely well made, a beautiful piece of kit for a decent price. As usual, lumen top makes something good, but look the size difference. This feels a bit sort of lighter. You could argue, well, this is metal, it's harder wearing. Completely correct, but are you throwing these off brick walls? Probably not. So with that in mind, you may be better off with this. So look, much smaller. The TIR obviously cuts down on space, and because this has a removable AAA, whereas this doesn't, this has to be a slightly bit bigger because you've got springs and all sorts of things. So it depends what you want, but I was very impressed with the size of this. Also, it's USB rechargeable with the flap. The flap's not as waterproof as I would like, but they never are, and I'll show you that there. It's not very, it doesn't go in very deep. In fact, when you compare to the RovyVons, I quite like the RovyVons. If you have a look at the depth, see the depth of that, look. The depth of that is quite pronounced, whereas the depth on this isn't. It's what I would call a little bit more flimsy, look. It's just wobbling about, which is a bit of a shame. But, you know, you can't have everything. And moving on from that, I'll say that the high CRI auxiliary does work, and because this will tail stand or you can hang it, it is actually handy. I did try and read a book by it. I did some other work and it does work, and you get that nice long run time from that. I think it's about an hour and a half, because it's outputting at about 22 lumens, so nice to see that. It's TIR, this is the right choice for a small light. You could argue that, hang on, you're saying TIR is brilliant for a keychain light, then why are you carrying a light that doesn't have TIR? Well, my thoughts are, with this gives me a little bit more reach, because an orange peel will give you a little bit more reach, but you could argue that this is only 120 lumens. Because this is more than double, this is going to push out far anyway, and because of that, I'm thinking I might change to this and get rid of my TI3, but we'll come to that at the end of the review. Okay, so TIR, right choice for a keychain light, and it does work beautifully, as you've seen. You can use it whilst charging, so if you've got this plugged in and charging, it'll still run. Very, very nice feature. I like that. And it's pretty cheap. It's only about, I think it's about 20 bucks at the moment, which I noticed these have come down, because these used to be a bit of a silly price, the RovyVons. I never understood why they were so high. Fair enough on the ones made out of titanium and brass and things like that. Sorry, copper. That's acceptable. But I never really understood the price, and I noticed these have come down big, and I wonder if it's because these have come out and the price on this is good. So are there any cons? Well, there are. There's a little bit of pulse width modulation, and I'll show you that. I'll go to the lowest setting. So I'll go to the lowest setting there. You may or may not see it on camera. I'll try and pick a range where you can see it. It's very hard to see. There, you may see, you see there's like black bands moving up and down. That's just how the roll and shutter effect of the camera picks it up. But what's happening there is, especially at low levels, there's a little bit of pulse width modulation. It is nowhere near as bad as the RovyVon, which I'll show you now. So if we go to the RovyVon, you see that? At any range, you can see those lines flickering. You see them? Very, very, very noticeable on this light, whereas it's much, much less noticeable on the Tiki. So what pulse width modulation is effectively they're turning the light on and off rapidly to get a desired output. So it's on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. Now, that's fine if these peaks and troughs are close enough together. They're very imperceptible to the human eye, which is fair enough. But as they get further and further apart, it becomes a hell of a lot more noticeable. And some people, it's more noticeable to them, especially as flashlight snob like me. So at the lowest level, yes, you can see it. But at the highest level, and we'll go straight to the highest level, I really can't see any, and you can't see any on camera at any range. But you could argue, well, you see less on the high level on this. You do, but it's less on this. It's to a level where it's not really an issue, which is a massive point, because I mean, I've gone over this, and we'll go to the video of the beam versus beam to see that pulse width modulation. I'm not going to go over it yet again. I feel like Groundhog Day. Okay, so another thing, the button, it's dead stiff. On the RovyVon, it's on and it's off. It's on and it's off. This, I'm having to press right in. You know, you've got to have a grip like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
You son of a bitch.
To get it to work. You could argue, well, that's not a bad point. That's actually a good point. It means it's less likely to go off in your pocket. And yes, you're completely right. But when you're trying to time double clicks and triple clicks and all this, it makes it a little bit more irritating. I'm hoping with time that subsides. So I'd be interested, anyone who does own this thing here, can you put in the comment section whether you have a problem with this? This could be just me being a right weakling, who knows? But I do a lot of weightlifting, so I've got quite a strong grip, and you know, it's not an issue, but it's just a little pick point that I wanted to bring up. Other than that, I wish it was a little bit more waterproof, but you can't have that because it's USB rechargeable. So what can you do? Unless you bring out a wireless charging one, which would be great, because I wireless charge my phones and headphones and things like that. But I can't see that happening anytime soon. And it would take up too much space because you'd have to have a coil in there anyway. And I would prefer to be USB-C. I don't care if it makes this 1/4 millimeter bigger. I'm not interested. I don't think that's an issue when you compare it to something like that or that, because it's still smaller. So I don't care. Make it USB-C. So other than that, really good. So I'm going to give this a quick mark, and then I'll give it a quick comparison. Then I'll stop whinging and go outside. So I'm going to give this a 9, because as a keychain light, it covers all the boxes. The only things I'm whinging about are, oh, the button's a little bit stiff. I want a USB-C, you know, because I'm a USB-C snob, and I want it to be a bit more waterproof. And well, tough, you can't, because it's USB. So I have to look at myself and say, look, are you being picky? Well, I am. So I have to give this 9. Look, for 20 bucks, that's brilliant, and I would happily give that as a present to someone. I really like it, and I think they've done a better job. You haven't got all the pulse width modulation issues on this and the daft sort of rent-a-cop modes and things like that you have on the RovyVon. So as a comparison there to the RovyVon, this is cheaper. Yeah, the button's a bit stiffer, but at least the secondary modes are useful. So I'd still probably go for that. I mean, you can compare it to something like the EDC 01 by Lumentop, a beautiful light. I still recommend this to people. It's a fantastic light, and you can just change the battery out. But you've got to ask yourself, how many spare batteries are you taking? And when I asked myself that question, I thought that's a good point, you know, because I carry this, but thinking, oh, no, brilliant, I can change that battery anytime I want. But do I carry a spare battery? No, I don't, because it's a keychain light. So I'm hypocritical promoting that feature when it's not something I'm using. So because of that, I'm probably going to change and put that on my keychain. But in regards to this, you're only getting 120 lumens, and it's a hell of a lot bigger and a bit more heavier, and there's no secondary mode, so you could argue this is still better. You can compare it to something like I think this is the JetBeam Jet U. I'll just double check. Yes, the Jet U. Really nice TIR, and because it's JetBeam, beautiful surface. It's almost like a ceramic coating. It isn't ceramic, it's an anodization, but beautiful. I mean, this only has 2 modes. It's got your low and your high, but beautiful. Really like this, and it's quite compact. If you look, it's on par with the because they're both TIRs with the Lumentop there. So again, only 120 lumens though. You could go for something a lot smaller. So you could go for something like the Claris Mini one. Beautiful TIR, it works. It's a micro lens TIR. So I'll just show you that there. Beautiful, nice diffuse beam. Really like this, but the problem is the battery runtime isn't going to be very good. Although, interestingly, look, it's got a tiny little battery, but again, removable batteries are great, but are you carrying a spare? No, you're not. So it's a 10180 in there. So unless you've got a spare battery, on like a little pill case or something. Is that really a necessary feature? You could argue that it isn't, but it's nice to have. One thing I do prefer on this is the USB charging, which is behind a threaded O-ring section, so it's waterproof. You're not losing waterproofing by getting that, so I really like that. That is a plus point over that, but the runtime on that's a lot better and the output's better. This is about 130 lumens. Very similar to that, I'll put that down, is the, if I've got it, let's have a look. There it is, the Mech Army X4S, I think, and I'll just double check. Yes, it's the X4S. I really like this. This has a slightly longer runtime than this. I'm not sure how they've achieved that because they both use exactly the same battery. But this again has the USB charging behind an O-ring section. You see the O-ring there? Brilliant. Very, very, very intelligent design. I really like this actually. I did a little bit of walking test with this, and this I really, really liked. TIR works beautifully. They should be commended for making a nice small light there. A nice large opening there. No messing about, whereas on some of them they can be a bit poor. But again, about 130 lumens, but the battery isn't going to last very long on maximum. So you're probably thinking, well, okay, what other small ones are there? Well, there's this bulky one by Astrolux, but it's getting a little bit old in the tooth. Better CRI, but you're getting a little bit of pulse width coming in there, and it's very, very bulky. Let's look at the comparison there. You know, very bulky and rather heavy. So put that to one side. Also, you've got the Nitecore tube, same manufacturer, Nitecore. You're only getting about 45 lumens out of this, and the problem is the light comes straight back in your face and it ruins your night vision. You can get around that by putting your thumb over like that, so the light is predominantly going where you want it to go. I don't know why they don't just, all they need to do to fix this is literally put a piece of plastic over here, you know, like a reflective plastic or something, but they don't seem to do that. I know a new version of this is coming out, but I'll look at that when it arrives. But you've got this if you want it, but only about 45 lumens, very light, but I mean, look at the size. You know, you could argue this is, yes, it's thinner, but I mean, dear me, in volume, they're probably very similar, so I'd still rather go for this. So there's the tube. You're probably thinking, okay, what else is there? Well, from Nitecore, you've got another three to think of. So you've got the Nitecore tip, much bigger, more controls, no auxiliary though. This gives you, I think it's about 360 lumens on maximum. Decent light. Now this is weird. I'll turn it off. There you go. This uses it's got a LED down there, and it's almost like a frosted optic. So it's not a TIR, so it does give you a little bit of throw, but still with a diffuse beam. It does an extremely good job. This is very hard wearing, and it also has, if I move that back to that side, sorry, USB charging. And it does work, and I've used this on keychains, and it's a decent light. Pretty light, bit of metal over the top there, does a decent job, but that's getting a bit old in the tooth because there's a version 2 of that. Now the version 2 of that is here. So I'll take it out of its holder just so you can get a proper look at it. There you go. So we'll take that out. Now, in comparison, massively heavy. This is like, you know, much more heavy and much more bulky, but it's got 2 LEDs behind a TIR setup. Now, what's the point of that? You're probably thinking, well, much more output. Bang, there you go, 720 lumens, so massive difference. And also it has a very handy feature. It has a mag connector. So if you wanted to take this off your keys, you just take it off like that, and there's your charging port behind. Very, very handy, but the price of this is much more than the Nitecore Tiki. Now, when you want to put it back in your keys, so if you imagine this is on your keys, there you go, done. Very, very strong magnets as well. I can't imagine that coming off by accident unless you fall down a flight of stairs or something. So very, very good. I like that feature. This is all aluminum, so nice to see, but 720 probably, you know, that's quite bulky. But you could argue, well, it's not that bulky, because if you look at the set of keys, here's the fob for the car here. Now look, it's not that much bigger than the fob of the car, although you could argue it's double the weight at least. So it's quite bulky in your pocket, whereas this isn't. So there's another option. If you wanted a little bit more light than the tip, but you didn't want to start spending big bucks on the tip too there, you could go for the Nitecore Tiny. Very light, very compact, USB rechargeable through micro USB, and this puts out 380 lumens. So, and it's again through a micro lensed TIR. So there's the full mode there. Very, very handy. This is great for gifts for people and things like that, and it does have a nice output, and it charges rather rapidly. Just to give you a size comparison there. So you could argue that it's only a little bit bigger with this section, if you look at it as a side profile, although this is a little bit taller. But this is giving you 300 lumens, whereas this is giving you 380. So you're getting less lumens, but you're getting the added functionality of the auxiliary modes there. Another option, if you wanted to go on the cheap, you get the basically a knockoff of the Nitecore tip, is the Astrolux K1. It's okay. It's basically comparable to this, similar output. Although it does have secondary modes. You've got like a red light and a UV mode, but very, very heavy because it's metal. So there's your options. So we'll put them to one side. And now, enough of me waffling. I tried my best to make this a rapid review, and I hope I've done that. So 9 out of 10. I'm very impressed. In fact, I'm so impressed, I'm going to do something I didn't think I was going to do. I'm going to take this off. So let's have a look. So we'll take this off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to put on the new one. So we'll undo that. There you go. Have I done that the right way? Yes. So open that. And then the new champion is now on the keys there. Although what I might do is I might get rid of this section because I find these aren't particularly reliable. And I'll just go with the split ring straight to there. But a lot lighter than what I was using, and I'll miss this. I will miss this because, as you can see, I've used this a lot. The knurling's all weighed down and the anodization's coming off. This has been extremely invaluable light to me, and it saved me going through the woods once. But I think it's time to send this to the big flashlight heaven in the sky. So with that in mind, this gets 9 out of 10. It's now my new keychain light, and we'll say goodbye to this. And let's go outside and have a look at what this light actually looks like. Goodbye.